Optimal health for high performers. This is the Health Upgrade Podcast with Dr. Nawaz Habib.
Welcome back to the Health Upgrade Podcast. This is Dr. Habib. I am here with my co-host JP.
Hi, how are you?
And we are very excited for a wonderful guest and a friend of mine, Mona Sharma. This episode of the Health Upgrade Podcast is brought to you by Truvaga. Have you been looking for a simple way to feel calmer, think clearer, and sleep better? Imagine achieving this with just 2 minutes a day. I'm excited to introduce you to Truvaga, a handheld device that supports your nervous system through gentle vagus nerve stimulation. As a doctor specializing in functional health and wellness, I've seen firsthand how Truvaga has accelerated healing in my clients. I've used this device to help people with a range of issues, from sleep disturbances and heart palpitations to digestive dysfunction, nervous system imbalances, and mental wellness concerns. The results have honestly been remarkable. Truvaga is designed to catalyze and accelerate the shift in your body from fight or flight to rest, digest, and recover mode, helping you manage stress, maintain mental clarity, and unwind more easily. It's not just theory. I've witnessed its positive impact on real people facing real health challenges. The best part? Truvaga fits seamlessly into your routine. No need to carve out hours for wellness. Just 2 minutes a day can make a difference. It's a small investment of time for potentially significant benefits in how you feel and function each day. If you're curious to experience Truvaga for yourself, visit truvaga.com/upgrade. You can save $30 on your device by using the code UPGRADE30 at checkout. Remember, that's truvaga.com, truvaga.com/upgrade. It might just be the first step towards a calmer, clearer you, just as it has been for many of my clients. Thank you so much for joining us, Mona. We're really excited to hear your story and to kind of share your background and your experience in how nutrition has been and lifestyle factors have been such a huge factor in your health and producing health in not only yourself, but your amazing clients as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
This is the highlight of my week, joining you guys here today. So thank you.
I love it. I realize we're recording in January. We're just after kind of this whole situation has taken place in LA with the fires. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody out there who's been affected in the Palisades and anywhere in the West Coast with these challenging fires. I know you're doing your best to keep up with it. So just want to share that sentiment with everybody out there.
Yeah, the kind of global compassion recently, it's been overwhelming in the most positive way. And to consider such a world disaster at a time of such intensity to living, I have to say is the greatest gift. So thanks for bringing it up.
Let's start a little bit kind of in the back, talking about your story and how your health struggles played a role in you determining that nutrition and lifestyle and using food as medicine really was an important factor in your journey. Let's start off with your kind of challenges from your teenage years.
Yeah. First of all, working as a nutritionist, a lot of people think that I've figured it out. I've cracked the code, and it's a journey. Like, I'm still on the journey. I just have such great tools now in order to course correct whenever I veer off. But for your listeners, it's important for them to know my life used to look very differently. So I'm actually going on, this will be my 15th year leaving my old life. I joke, I come from the corporate world. So because I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer or a judge like my brother coming from a South Asian father, getting into the corporate cosmetic world, you bet I worked my butt off to get to the top of the game really, really fast. And that's what I did in my 20s. And here I was, I was making great money. I was traveling the world. I was talking to people about fashion and beauty, but I was also waking up in hotel rooms, not knowing what city I was in. I was chasing these numbers and reporting to my boss every single week in a very cutthroat industry. And that led to the buildup of anxiety and a lot of tension going to work and worry. And I think that deep down there was this misalignment. When you're doing something that you're not meant to do, but you're trying to fulfill this bucket of like wealth and success and accolades and prestige. And I was doing all that, but I was so unfulfilled. And that anxiety, my body, I couldn't ignore the symptoms anymore because it turned into heart palpitations. So these heart palpitations got so rapid, so fast, to the point where I would be, bending down to pick up a pair of socks and I would feel like I would black out. I used to love love running at that point and, going for a run, I would have to grab onto the handlebars because I would pass out at the gym. So going to the doctor, I wasn't interested in getting to the root cause of my healing at that time. I wanted the quick fix, like so many people do. And that quick fix was a prescription medication called beta blocker. It was a beta blocker that I went on, and it seemed to work initially, but my heart rate also slowed down considerably. And traditionally, I also had very low blood pressure. So I became completely lethargic. And I ended up gaining about 45 pounds on these beta blockers. So, hey, doc, this is sort of helping. It's not completely helping. What's the next plan B? Like, this isn't working for me. They said, well, why don't we take you in for surgery? We can do an ablation. And so we went in for my first heart surgery in my 20s, and they treat it like minor surgery because it was an open heart surgery, but it's heart surgery. Like, you're signing your life away before you go in. And you're awake through the whole thing. I saw my heart on a massive monitor, and there's cameras that go in through your neck and through your groin. And they try to induce these palpitations that I knew would only happen if I was moving my body. So they inject me with caffeine and adrenaline and all these stimulants. And a couple hours later, they find, oh, great, we found her. We can do this ablation. We ended up doing 2 ablations where they burn off this electrical node in your heart. It feels like an explosion of fire going off in your chest. But I woke up the next morning in the hospital and my heart was pounding. So, okay, now what? We went in for a second surgery just a couple months later. And in that surgery, they did an ablation, but the heart palpitations persisted in the surgery. So they were looking for where to do it again. And they said, okay, great news, Mona, we can do it again. However, there's a chance you might have to wear a pacemaker for the rest of your life. It was one of those moments, when your life flashes before your eyes, like you hear these stories, right? My life flashed before my eyes. What the hell is happening? I'm in my 20s. I'm on heart medication. I'm identifying as somebody who is sick. I'm in my second surgery, and now I might have to wear a battery pack under my skin for the rest of my life to keep me alive. Like, what is happening? I was by myself. There was my mom, my family, they weren't in the room with me. And I had to make a decision in that moment. And that's when I knew that there was a better way to heal. So, Dr. Navas, I've shared my story with you about being half Indian. My dad knew about Ayurveda. And living in Toronto at the time with my mom's debilitating rheumatoid arthritis, I've only ever known my mom's hands to be completely deformed. He would take us to live at an ashram every summer. Ashrams are spiritual centers where you practice yoga and meditation and breathwork every day. You're sitting in community. You're eating in nature. You're practicing stillness. You're being present to the emotions and the thoughts in your body. So in that moment on the surgery table at 24 years old, I knew I had to go back to my roots. So I called it quits on the corporate world, just temporarily, ended up going back in, went to the ashram. I lived there for about 3 months and the weight fell off my body. My heart palpitations, they completely went away. I got off the beta blockers. And this isn't to say that people on beta blockers right now who are experiencing the same thing should try to do this as a strategy. But for me, the heart palpitations was the final signal from my body telling me something was wrong. You can't ignore what's happening in here anymore. Like, you better pay attention. Your heart's going to be completely out of whack. Doctors never asked me about the stress that I was feeling. They didn't ask me about the literal heartache I was going through in my life around my parents getting divorced, relationships with my community, my sister. They didn't ask me about becoming my mom's primary caregiver, emotional caregiver source when my parents divorced, about living out of alignment and fear of this job and my future, like so many things that were contributing to this. And by the way, when my heart palpitations were at their worst, I was hardcore. I was hardcore dieting. I was on the Atkins diet, carb-free, sugar-free, fat-free, everything free at my house, working out for an hour and a half a day. My health was suffering. So I share that for your audience who might be doing all the things, but their body is still trying to communicate with them that something is wrong. And for me, it got to a point where I was ignoring the whispers for so long that eventually it turned into screams. And so I've never looked back. I actually became a nutritionist for my own personal healing journey, and then a yoga teacher, and then meditation teacher. And then I ended up getting into NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, but all for my own personal healing. And then by chance, I started working with some NHL players in Toronto, and that opened the door to my future. And now I've never looked back. And the key foundation is like, your body knows how to heal. You have to listen to the symptoms, and you have to be strong enough, brave enough to speak up and have a voice for your body when doctors are trained to do what they do best. They take away suffering. That's what the doctors did for me, but they didn't get to the root cause of why my suffering was happening.
You said something really powerful there. You mentioned that the body knows how to heal. The body has this innate capacity. And I love that we're living in a time where we can finally find scientific reasoning behind this vitalism, behind this idea of this innate human intelligence that we have. Because one of my favorite quotes as a doctor and how I work with my clients is the doctor's job is to distract the mind and enable the body to do the healing. Because it is often our mind that stops us or pushes us into a situation where healing is not possible. And we've talked about this a lot, both on our podcast and Mona, we did on yours as well, where we can't heal when we're in a sympathetic fight or flight state, when our bodies are stuck in this stressful experience, when we're constantly worried about our finances, when we're constantly worried about challenges of taking care of loved ones and having these challenges of, getting my kids to school at the right time and all the stressors of, maybe something traumatic happened in my past, things like that, that push us into this state where we're in this sympathetic situation. It sounds very much like that's what your body was trying to tell you for a very long time, that your body was really stuck in this fight or flight sympathetic state for so long that it wasn't enabling that healing process. Does that sound?
You nailed it. And honestly, I think that I had become addicted to this cycle of fight or flight since I was 6 years old. Where you're right, there was a traumatic experience where my learned blueprint for if something happened was to work harder, to do more, to, don't think about it, go and distract yourself, go do something better. And even the foundation of the ashram, the intention is great with so many religions and spirituality, but I was constantly on this path of betterment. Right? Betterment, doing more, becoming better, looking at how I wanted to be in the future, what I wanted to achieve in the future. And what does that mean? When we're constantly focused on being better, we're incapable of living in the present moment. So it's no wonder it was so easy for me to just no, I'm going to listen to the bloating later, fatigue, sadness. No time for you right now. But you nailed it. Fight or flight for me was a pure addiction. And I really had to get to the ashram, tap into parasympathetic. And all of a sudden it was like this realigning of my mind and my body. And I would say the integration was happening within my body. Finally, when I could quiet and silence the mind.
Albert Einstein is quoted as saying that you can't simultaneously work towards peace while preparing for war. And I think that the human body does exactly the same thing. And, I'm reminded of the late Michael Crichton, who, made the Jurassic Park movies and all of that. And he actually was the inspiration behind ER because he was also a physician. And very early on in his career, he actually wrote a book, which was a nonfiction book about his experiences during residency. And one of the big themes of that book is about the fact that when he had the opportunity to speak with people who had, just had a heart attack or had cancer or any one of a number of different conditions, very serious ones, and they were going to be in the hospital for a long time if they survived at all. Inevitably, when he talked to the patients never said, well, I ate too many eggs or I, was exposed to this toxin or something. They all said things about their stress levels. And they always talked about whether it was relationships that had gone bad, financial situations, or overworking themselves or other things. To me, it is such a clear sign that the autonomic nervous system is the master controller for everything. We know now through the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway that being in that fight or flight state, being in that sympathetic overdrive will drive inflammation. And inflammation is so important for everything else. But now we're understanding that there's also a tie into metabolism and that the autonomic nervous system actually controls your mitochondrial function and the health of your mitochondria. And if you have those two systems out of whack, your immune system and your mitochondria out of whack, well, you're just setting yourself up for failure. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. So this idea that you get yourself back into that state of parasympathetic recovery, it doesn't have to be for, listen, maybe at your stage it needed to be for 3 months. But my suspicion is that within a matter of possibly hours, but certainly within days of being there, many of your symptoms had already cleared up. It doesn't take 3 months. It takes 2 days. It takes 2 hours of just getting out of that state to allow your body to shift back into healing. You can be at war for years and years and years. And the peace table, you can come to a peace agreement in a day. Okay. If you're ready. So it works the same way for your body.
JP, that's such a good point, right? And this is what I really want to make clear. So there's all of these lessons in ancient wisdom, right? The things that I practiced that we can no longer even call them woo woo anymore because they're being backed by science, right? Now the Western world and science is catching on. Hey, we can actually validate some of that stuff. So within a few days, you can see a physiological change to your nervous system. Within a few days, you can see a microbial change to your gut microbiome and the way that your gut functions, which means that you're optimizing your immune system, which means that you're experiencing less stress. And like, it's like this buzzword inflammation, right? Inflammation starts from everywhere. It's the instigation of all disease, but we have to understand like what's really happening. And the sources of the inflammation for everyone are all sparked or instigated by different things. And it's like the world today has become this, inflammation factory, right? But we have the power to make different choices every single day. It's not about starting on Monday or starting next week. It's the decisions that we make in every day. And I'm convinced, and like the one commonality in the past 15 years of doing this is when people hop on that first consultation call with me, Mona, just tell me what to eat. Tell me what's the perfect diet. What's the supplement protocol? I'll work out however you tell me you want to work out. That's great. And I'm sure you'll do that. And you might see some results, but you'll probably be back in my chair just a couple of weeks later when you quote unquote fall off the wagon, right? There is no wagon. When I get my clients talking around, well, like, when did you start making decisions like this? Like, why do you think it's okay to go out and abuse yourself with food? Or when's the last time you truly felt energy or a joy for life when you woke up? 9 times out of 10, I met with tears. And the tears are from people saying, like, I don't remember what it's like to feel good in this body or to actively choose to nourish myself like I love myself. And we've never been taught to do that, right? We've never been taught to eat like we love ourselves, to sleep like we love ourselves, to have conversations and watch things and listen to things because we love ourselves so much. We want to optimize. We're used to throwing things down the hatch and we expect our bodies to deal with it, right? And that's a big instigator of inflammation right there. So I love that you brought that up because people are so often looking for the quick fixes, but doing challenging things instead of doing the things that might bring them a little bit more ease and harmony.
And I find it so interesting that people, when they go on a more strict diet and they start to take care of themselves, they're still looking for the cheat day. And we've had this conversation and a little bit of a debate back and forth about this. But that cheat day, I'm sorry, I just don't feel better after the cheat day. If the cheat day is supposed to be like, okay, this is really hard work, and then the cheat day is like the day to feel great and feel better. But all the things that cheat days entail, eating the pancakes with maple syrup and Doritos and all the rest, those things are damaging. They make you feel terrible. Why would that be? It's sort of like the guys who like to celebrate and go out and get so drunk that they can't even find their way home. Like, how is that celebrating? You're going to feel terrible the next day. Why don't you celebrate by saying, I'm going to make myself feel really, really good by doing a cleanse or getting to the gym and working out or doing something that's good for you. That's the cheat day. That's the getting away from the stress and getting back into doing the good things for yourself.
You got it. Do you guys feel like, I'm sure with other guests that you've had on, there is this awakening now. People are starting to see through the fact that, I've done so many diets. I'm sick of doing this anymore. And, I'm seeing these incredible people on Instagram who their morning routine includes 30 items for them to feel good. And it's like, I'm exhausted just thinking about those 30 items, right? So I think that the future of healthcare and health optimization is understanding that your perfect diet, your perfect healing program, your perfect health practice, mindfulness tools should be as unique as your thumbprint. They should be so bio-individual based on your constitution. What brings you joy? What makes you feel ease? What foods make you feel good? What foods are even good for your constitution, right? And I think that for a lot of people, they don't know. We've become so conditioned to looking outside of ourselves for solutions, down to, my parents were immigrants. So I remember in the 80s, going to McDonald's was like, it's like prestigious almost. Like, oh my gosh, my dad coming from New Delhi is like, all of a sudden we can go do this thing. But that was conditioning. So to my brain at that time, that was like comfort food. But you had to get to a point of understand like, oh, shoot, no, I want to be deconditioned to these health rituals that aren't healthy. And that's a terrible example. But there's so many other things that people are doing today, like over caffeinating or using too many stimulants or exercising in ways that are punishing their bodies instead of bringing them a sense of ease and joy. And even fasting, right? Fasting is something that's so powerful. It's such an incredible tool for the body, but it's not for everyone.
I love this, the bioindividuality piece and determining for each individual. And you used a word there, feel. How do you feel? How does your body feel when you do this? When you have a cheat day, which, by the way, who are you cheating?
Yeah.
Yourself.
Why are you cheating your life? Yeah.
But when you don't take the time to feel specifically what's happening within your body, when you act in a certain way, when you make a certain lifestyle or dietary choice, that feeling piece is really important. You brought up something earlier. I'd love to kind of get your take on it, how you went through kind of the Ayurveda training, the yoga training, the meditation training, and you went into NLP. And I think that's really cool because for those who don't know, NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. And the principles of NLP, I'm not very well versed, but I understand that there are these meta programs of our values, our beliefs, kind of the stories, the language that we use in our own habits that are essentially the filter by which we see the world.
You got it. Yeah.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about how we filter things based on our experiences and how we can change our language and change our words to actually enable that healing process to occur.
You got it. Yeah. So NLP, what I became fascinated with reading at the ashram and understanding, okay, so here I am at the ashram. The stage is set to have the right food, the practices, the schedule, the mindfulness rituals every single day. But oh my God, what is going to happen when I go back home, back into the life in the real world? So the question I was asking myself most is, why is it so hard for me to choose myself when I'm back home? Why won't I prioritize my wellness rituals when I'm back home the way that I do here? Like so many of us, right? It's so easy to go away and be healthy and, feel good doing these practices when we're somewhere else. But why is this state? It's almost like flow state. Why can't I do this myself? And I started understanding that these were my inner critic was my worst enemy, right? So Michael Singer, he's an incredible author, has a great book called The Untethered Soul, talks about this voice in your head being the evil roommate that you live with and how much control we give to this evil roommate in our head. And I would say that every thought that I had was either criticizing myself, judging myself, worrying about the future, anxiety about the future. And where did that come from? And how can I understand this? How can I understand how to make changes if I don't understand where any of this comes from? And so I started to just become mindful. I think a lot of people think of the word mindfulness as like, oh, I've got to do something. Mindfulness is simply the act of awareness. So I encourage listeners, if you're listening to the voice in your head, how many times throughout the day are you kind to yourself? Are you speaking loving thoughts? Are you caring for your inner child within that just needs some soothing when you go through periods of intense stress and worry and fear and anxiety? So when we think about it, like on a chart of vibration, right? If most of us are going out into the world, right? When we're experiencing things like stress, worry, anxiety, fear, and shame, we're living in this contracted, low vibrational state, which we can measure. And that was my DNA. Like that's who I was. Anxiety was my blueprint. I identified so much with anxiety, but I wore it with a badge of honor because it made me go out in the world and work harder. Life isn't about working harder. It shouldn't be. That's conditioning. So if my client's belief system is that they need to work hard or sacrifice foods that they love in order to be healthy, or work out at the gym for hours in order to feel pain, in order to get to this like status quo way of how they're supposed to look, it's never going to work long term. So NLP for me was a way of understanding my clients' belief systems and the thoughts that they were using towards themselves that were preventing them from making long lasting change. And again, we all have programming, all of us. I work with people from around the world, and this programming is the same. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I won't have enough. What if they don't like me? I'm worried about the future, right? And media is very equipped with quick fixes. Come eat here and you'll feel better about yourself. Come indulge in this sugar and you'll feel great. Come to this all-inclusive and drink as much alcohol as you want to and life will get better, right? So we're conditioned to think that these toxic traits, societal traits that have become normalized are the things that are going to make us feel better, instead of addressing, where did these thoughts come from? Why do I not feel safe in my body?
When in reality, what they're doing is they're numbing these thoughts, they're numbing the feeling and not allowing you to actually feel what's happening within your body.
Smack, so much of what my wife talks about. My wife is an executive coach, very high level executive coach. She's dealing with people at the highest levels of industry. And, one of the things that she talks about a lot is imposter syndrome, that feeling of that inner voice that tells you, I'm not good enough. I can't believe that anybody put me in this position. I can't live up to the demands of this. And why would anybody ever want me to be the person doing this? So you have to get over that inner dialogue that you're having with yourself. And I'm reminded of that very famous clip of Bruce Lee talking, the famous martial artist who talked about the power of words. And, he makes this sort of interesting pun. He said, words have magical powers. And he said, that's why it's called spelling, which I thought was really kind of cute. But at the same time, it really is interesting because words have the ability to change how you perceive the world around you and things that you interact with. There was another interesting study recently done where they had actors walk up to individuals and ask them to just hold a cup of coffee while they did something with their phone. Their hands were full. And they had these people hold either a cold cup of coffee or a warm cup of coffee. And then about 2 minutes later, somebody else came up to the person and asked them to read a 3-paragraph little, vignette and then describe the main character. And the people, unbeknownst to them, they 80% of the time, if they had held the warm cup of coffee, they responded that the main character was a warm and caring person. And if they held the iced cold cup of coffee, they said he was icy and uncaring. And it's amazing how cues in your life have that kind of impact over what would be, you would think, a very complicated cognitive process, completely controlled by your autonomic nervous system. We think of ourselves as being brilliant, and because we shop online on Amazon and we take jet travel to other continents. But at the end of the day, 99% of what controls our lives is our autonomic nervous system and how we're interacting with the world in a subconscious level.
And our autonomic nervous system is programmed based on memories. And a lot of these memories from instances from when we were children. We might not understand why we have them. I'll use myself as an example. I don't know if I shared this with you, Navas, when you were here. I started my podcast. People think, oh, Mona, it's so easy for you. You've been on national television. It's got to be so easy. Me showing up to interview guests on a podcast was the equivalent of feeling like I'm going to die. I'm going to die today. I'm going to be outed. People are going to be completely on to me. It's over. I'm going to collapse and fall apart. And I'm laughing now, but it took me, and this is why I say growth is a journey. It was unveiling another part of me that I had to understand and where the nervous system came from and the programming that I had around me focusing on what people were going to think performing, me focusing on if I was going to say the right thing, how is this going to go? I'm not going to be present. I'm going to be worried about the future. Like I wasn't even going to be present to the conversation. That's programming. Instead, if I could shift my inner dialogue, which is what I ended up doing, to what is the intention? What do I love about podcasting? I love connecting with people. I love being a student. I love learning. I love engaging with others. I love being on purpose. I love helping people. What if I could help one person today that's going to hear this message? All of a sudden, the imposter symptom, it faded. It gone completely. Oh my God, I instantly became of service. And this is where, for listeners, I share that story because I think that that's one of the imposter syndrome is one of the biggest reasons that we're not living a fulfilled life. We're so concerned and worried about what would happen. What would happen if I change and do something completely uncomfortable and out of the norm? I want to stay comfortable right here. Just keep me in my box, in my shell. Things are fine here. I'm normal, like things feel good, instead of the discomfort and the magic that's on the other side. So just get in tune. It's like dropping out of your head and into your heart. And this is what a tactic that I use with all my clients. Like, oh, you're in your head. Are you speaking from your head, from the thoughts, the voice in your mind? Or are you dropping into the heart, into the body that holds wisdom and magic? And you move from thinking about something being hard to knowing that you were in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
I love that because we all know this very famous quote from Star Wars, do or do not, there is no try, right? And it's almost like when you're trying or when you're thinking about doing something, it's that trying. But in reality, you're not creating that practical reason for why, and then right? And when you do that, and you can feel it and you can experience it and it's happening in reality and you're making that happen in some capacity. I think that's such a powerful thought. And I think this is a really cool practical takeaway for everybody. When you can shift that inner dialogue into what could go wrong to what will go right and why this is what you should be doing and why you feel like this is the right thing for you to do. What are some of the practical strategies that you use with some of your clients to help shift that inner dialogue? Are there any specific tools?
I would say, we mentioned the practice of embodiment. So on every call that I have with my clients, we drop into the body through breathwork. And the guided practice, really, people can do this right now, drop into your toes, like feel your toes, feel your feet, feel your ankles, feel your calves, your knees, your thighs. And take it a step further. Visualize yourself outside in nature with your feet on the ground, in grass, on sand, on a beach, literally. And like 9 times out of 10, again, I get a massive exhale. And people just start they close down the tabs that are running in the mind. And all of a sudden they start feeling a little bit more peace. And the contract with the mind that holds so much tension just dissipates a little bit more. So that's one easy way. Before you hop onto any Zoom, any call, any meeting, any presentation, just drop into your body. You can listen to a guided visualization. You can focus on the feeling of your heartbeat and the feeling of expansion around your heart. There's an organization called HeartMath who's really brought the science to the table on this. When we adopt heart coherence, right? My heart was out of coherence when I was living in fight or flight. My heart came into coherence, meaning it was stable, when I was experiencing a sense of ease and flow within my body. How do we get into heart state coherence? Start to visualize gratitude, right? The science, again, we cannot experience stress and gratitude at the exact same time. It's impossible. We know this to be true. So I want you to start thinking about just one thing right now that you were so grateful for. Like, oh my gosh, when you think about that person, that place, that retreat, that impact, whatever it was, that book, that just like, oh my God, thank you so much for that. That feels so good in my heart. Take it a step further though and turn up the details. What did it feel like when you're in that person's environment? What does it feel like to hold them, to be there? What does it smell like, right? This is NLP. What did it sound like? Were you at a beach? Was there the sounds of the ocean, the birds? Could you feel the wind on your face? Was there a smell that feels nostalgic to you? And all of a sudden, you're coming into your heart center and you're feeling a sense of ease. Joe Dispenza has made this scientific. Your body does not know the difference between you experiencing something in the present moment versus the past, if you can make it feel real enough to your body. So adopt that gratitude practice every single day. And for my clients, first thing in the morning, I ask them to, before they even open their eyes, put one hand on their heart, one hand on their belly, and just start to visualize gratitude. What are 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you're grateful for? And I encourage you to not think about, I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my partner. I'm grateful for my life. No, drop in. I'm grateful that my heart is beating this morning. I'm grateful that I'm waking up. I am so grateful that I live in a part of the world where I am safe. Like true gratitude, right? And then all of a sudden life shifts from becoming challenging and stress-ridden to joyful. And like, wow, what a beautiful experience. I was about to swear. What a beautiful experience.
And
You're allowed to swear here.
there are books about people who were living in in concentration camps in World War II, and were able to find, even in the most dire circumstances, something to be grateful for, something to have control over in a way that wasn't stressful, that allowed them to survive those horrible circumstances. It's interesting because there's a really great neuroscientist by the name of Anil Seth, and I'm a big fan of his. He's got a great book called Being You. And from your nodding, it sounds like you're both aware of him. But for our audience, Anil Seth has this really wonderful perspective, which is that the brain makes decisions and perceives things not solely from what's coming from the outside in. In fact, probably the majority of the influences that control how you perceive the world around you are actually your own memories, your own experiences, your own predispositions and biases. And so when you look at, and this is something that my wife talks about with her clients also, when you've got a situation that's stressful, you can either view it as something that's a negative, or you can view it as a positive challenge. You can view it as an opportunity. We've all seen, and experienced these situations where, your team is down by 10 points with 2 minutes to go. And it's funny, my younger son was just in that circumstance. His team was down 9 points with just under 2 minutes to go. And miraculously, my son hit 3 3-pointers and got the steal that won the game in the last 2 minutes of the game. I mean, you think to yourself, that's impossible. It's never going to happen. But it does happen. And he must have, as a 12-year-old, just said, you know what? I'm going to do this because it's going to be fun. My mom's watching. I want to do this, because you can't do that if you're stressed. You're not even going to hit the rim. You're going to be completely off. But he was in that zone of just feeling like, this is doable and I'm going to have fun doing it.
I love that you brought that up. Even that story, hearing it, like that feels like magic. Like, wow, I wish I could have seen that. That's so cool, right? So for listeners, something that you can do is ask yourself, let's just pretend that we all are wearing glasses. Okay. And we need these glasses. We have to wear these glasses every single day. But your glasses might be tainted with a lens that is preconditioning you to worry, to feeling more stress, to seeing life as like, ugh, this again, to seeing life as hard, to seeing life as like, oh, it's inevitable that I'm going to get sick, right? This is all conditioning, but I want you to imagine, what if you just changed the lens and you took the glasses off, right? If you had yellow lenses, life would look very yellow. If you had green lenses, life would look very, very green based on these lenses. So if you're looking to seek change and become like your son, which all of a sudden flip the lens, like, oh, I'm going to take that off. No, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to be present. This is going to be joyful. My mom's here. Let's do this, right? No matter what it is in your life. And many people listening are probably going through some really hard shit. Like, life presents us with a lot of really challenging, difficult situations. And like the state of the world right now, in and of itself, right? We say that the mind doesn't know the difference of things happening in the moment in front of us, but because of social media, it's like we're experiencing these things firsthand, even though they're countries miles away from us. So we have to address this, especially for our children. And we have to help them understand that just because they are picking up and learning and kind of absorbing their environment doesn't have to become their environment, right? So look at the life in which lens that you are watching or experiencing and take off the lens. It's your choice. And we can't empower the listeners to do that, right? This is that kind of catch, that word empowering. We can give education and hopefully they can become empowered themselves to make the changes that they want to see and feel in your life. And there's one more thing that I want to hover on what you said, right? So here we are, and like we're referencing these amazing books and strategies and wisdom and everything that exists out there. And us working in health and wellness, this $1 trillion industry, there's never been more awareness, education, information at your fingertips than ever before in history, right? And yet chronic disease in America, I'll speak to, is on the rise, right? So what was the stat on CDC? 6 in 10 people, 6 in 10 adults in the US have a chronic disease, and then 4 in 10 adults in the US have 2 or more chronic diseases. So things like heart disease, cancer, lung disease, getting stroke, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. From those diseases, we know as practitioners, like, those are all preventable diseases, right? And so if you're living in a society and you're seeing that this is the norm, that it's inevitable that we're going to get sick, this is the wake-up call. This is like, okay, I need to change my inner environment and how I'm treating my body and the choices that I'm making for myself every single day, because despite everything that we know, the system, unfortunately, is broken. And this is why I think conversations like this are so powerful, because we're bringing to the table the things that are not working and the things that are working, and ultimately how it comes down to each person on their own to make the changes that they want to see and feel.
Want to really riff off something you just talked about the prevalence of chronic disease, because one of the studies that I was instrumental in starting and worked very hard on was a study that a group of us did over in the UK. And we looked at the medical records of something about 150,000 people. And we were able to identify that there was about 30 to 35% of the population who had been diagnosed with multiple symptoms, if you will, or multiple conditions as they're labeled, but that they seemed to come together in groups, that you had groups of people who just had never been diagnosed with any of these conditions. And these conditions were things like migraine headaches, insomnia, depression, anxiety, widespread pain conditions, gastrointestinal problems, asthma and allergy. And when you had one of those conditions, the probability that you had multiple ones of those went up astronomically, which suggested that they were linked together and suggested a common underlying cause. And when you talk to the traditionally educated physician, what you found was, no. Headaches have nothing to do with gastrointestinal problems, or depression doesn't have anything to do with insomnia or widespread pain or, asthma. And yet when you look at the actual patient as a whole person, what you find is that there's a tremendous relationship across these conditions. And when we look to find out whether or not any one of those conditions was the underlying problem, we found that it wasn't, that there was something separate, what they call the latent cause, something that was otherwise undiagnosable, not non-observable, but undiagnosable as a condition that was driving all of these symptoms. And so I asked a simple question. I said, well, you have all of these symptoms if you have the flu. You have all of these symptoms if you have a GI bug. You'll have headaches, you'll have, feelings of depression, you'll have widespread pain. All of those things come with being sick. And so is there something about being sick that actually is running a program in your brain that makes you experience all these symptoms? And is there a way to break free from that? And that's where we got involved in looking at the autonomic nervous system and modulating it as a way to not simply, lower inflammation or to have one effect on the body, but getting you back into parasympathetic recovery mode resolved all of the symptoms simultaneously. And these patients who weren't even diagnosed with some of these conditions would come back and say, my symptoms over here on this thing that I had never been diagnosed for got better also. And so it's a remarkable reframing of how we view chronic disease.
Love that you brought that up. So I haven't shared too much, but I'm actually doing my master's in quantum healing. So
that is really cool, by the way. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. So again, it's very woo-woo, right? So to your point, a lot of my experience of my health was unlearning, right? It was a way of being. So going back to me experiencing anxiety from the time I was a little kid, I had stomach aches every day going to school. So I believed that, I'm somebody who gets stomach aches easily. I have anxiety. Like these belief systems about myself are just growing and growing and growing, right? Then I'm affirming it with, we know about the gut microbiome now. I was on antibiotics for 12 years straight in my life growing up. That's something else. I'm going to get sick. I'm going to get sick. Science is proving that I'm fall in that category of people who are most likely to get sick, right? But it was so refreshing, one with this Ayurvedic background, and then over the years working with Eastern practitioners who would, for example, acupuncture, right? To balance the chi within your body, these meridians, these energetic meridians within your body. And if you're somebody who's done acupuncture for, whatever it is, chances are, if you've been consistent with it, you felt a shift, which goes to show there is something else. There's wisdom within the body that enables it to heal itself, right? Dr. Deepak Chopra wrote a book on quantum healing. And when he first released it, he was outcasted. Like he was, I think he was let go from the school that he was teaching at. People saw it as woo. How can you come out with this? How can you document these cases of, of healing with people who broke up with conventional Western medicine? But now he's re-released the book, I think a couple of years ago, because he's backed it up with the science, which is what people needed to hear. People are fearful of the unknown. And if we're not taught that the body can heal itself, why on earth would we believe it, right?
And understand that the pharmaceutical industries, the medical establishment will fight you unless you can provide overwhelming scientific evidence. And even then, they'll try to suppress that because it's not in their best interest. I mean, I realize that gets a little bit political here, but I mean, it's true. It's undeniably true. And I think that, as you said, there's been an awakening. And I think people are talking about this. They're talking about the fact that, we really have to look at people's agendas here. It's not that everybody's bad. It's not that everybody's good. It's just that we're trying to get to the truth. We're really just trying to get to the truth.
We could do a whole podcast on this, right? I think because you can, again, understand that, we do live in a sick care system. Doctors are paid to write prescription drugs so that you are coming back to them, right? Doctors are paid for you to undergo CT scans and go through expensive modalities and treatments. They're not paid when you heal. So this is definitely a bigger topic. And, this red dye, why did it take so long to ban something that we know has been toxic?
It was banned in cosmetics. You couldn't put it on your skin, but you could put it into your mouth. I mean,
check this out. When I worked in the cosmetic industry, so you guys remember when parabens were banned because they were deemed to be toxic? So I was part of the education team going out into the world. Parabens are banned. Woohoo, this is great. However, for profit, these cosmetic companies had over 6 or 7 years of product sitting in factories that they were still legally allowed to sell through, right? So there is corruption. There is a sense of needing to keep people sick in order for our society to function in this weird way, unless people awaken to the fact that they can ask questions and read more about stories of people who are healing themselves, read more about the cases that exist out there around tumors that disappear. Right? There's a couple of great books. I mentioned Quantum Healing. Have you guys read The Pathway of Surrender by David Hawkins?
No.
Okay. Amazing book. He's got a portion on health also where he documents these cases around. There was nothing that changed around the person, finding these people who are willing to kind of let go of the traditional Western medicine system and then instead understand the physiological state of their nervous system and how they can shift their nervous system into feeling a state of rest and digest and restore, right? Every single day. What happens? All of a sudden, stress dissipates. When stress dissipates and anxiety goes away, we feel a little bit better. When we feel a little bit better, our digestion tends to optimize. When our digestion, the source of life, is optimal, we tend to feel a lot better, right? We're making better food choices for ourselves. We're sleeping a little bit better. And all of a sudden, it's like this cascade of symptoms that eventually dissipate simply by doing the work to feel a sense of ease in your body, which feels impossible to do in this day and age.
When we get into parasympathetic recovery, we know that inflammation levels go down. That's been documented for the last 20 plus years. And the guy who originally discovered it is probably going to end up with the Nobel Prize at some point. Okay, Kevin Tracy. And then also what it does to mitochondria. And now you've got the work with Thomas Seyfried recognizing that cancer is very likely driven more by mitochondrial dysfunction. And I'll add my piece to it, which is, and the mitochondrial dysfunction and the oxidative stress leads to reactive oxygen species and free radicals that damage your epigenome, and that the changes in protein expression and behavior of the cells isn't because of mutations in the DNA. It's because of changes to your epigenetics. And so when you look at it that way and you say, well, of course, if I'm stressed all the time, I'm going to increase my risk of cancer. If I'm going to be stressed all the time, I'm going to gain weight. If I'm stressed all the time, my inflammation levels are going to be high and I'm going to experience pain and I'm going to experience depression and I'm going to experience widespread, gastrointestinal issues. All of it is linked together. And that's why I started out by saying the autonomic nervous system is the master controller. It is the master controller of all of the systems in your body. And when it's out of whack, you are by definition moving away from homeostasis into the danger zone.
And isn't it fascinating that we are starting to prove that to optimize mitochondrial function and to optimize your autonomic nervous system, the program's pretty similar. There's a lot of similarities, right?
And we've known it for
What are some
10,000
of
years.
those?
And we've known it for 10,000 years. I mean, honestly, it's not rocket science. In fact, it's the opposite of rocket science. It's
So
just
let me
observation.
just observation. So let me bring this back through the lens of ancient healing then. Okay. So here's some of the pillars that I work with my clients that come from the ashram. So ancient healing rituals that everyone can practice in our modern world. And I'm sure you guys have had practitioners speak to each one of these on your show. But the first one is sleep, right? Sleep is the foundation for healing. It's not sleep when you're dead. It's now aligning your body's circadian rhythm so that you are resting and restoring each and every night. Sleep is the number one pillar for me before nutrition. We work on sleep before we even focus on food. Second one is proper nourishment from the body, right? So what are you digesting? And I always say to people, like, you don't need me to come into your home, but just pretend if you had a nutritionist come into your fridge and your cupboard, your cabinet, just pretend I'm with you tonight when you go home. What would you want me to see and what wouldn't you want me to see? And chances are you probably know what to throw in the trash. And for both of you, like, people know what to eat. People know what's healthy and what's unhealthy. But again, we become disillusioned because of marketing and media.
Ask yourself why you want to keep those things. Ask yourself why, because unless you have some sort of masochistic or self-loathing, you shouldn't want to keep those things if you're embarrassed to show your mom or your doctor or your friends who are interested in your health. Why are you doing it?
Yeah. I know some listeners are like, but Mona, the Doritos make me feel really good at the end of the day, or the glass of wine makes me feel really good at the end of the day. And then we dig a little bit deeper. And then here's the question that I want to put out there. Ask yourself, and like all jokes aside, is eating this or drinking this going to nourish me? Is it going to take me towards becoming the version of myself that I want to become and feel and live in this world? Or is eating this or drinking this or consuming this going to deplete me and keep me anchored where I am? If you use that as your guiding light question, chances are you're going to be on the right track for optimizing every single day. Is this nourishing me or is it depleting me? Simple, right?
On the nourish side, is it also a possibility to not just talk about what to eat, but when to eat as well? You mentioned fasting earlier. I think
it is really important.
Was that something that came up at the ashram much?
Yeah, so fasting is part of our daily schedule. So we have our meal at sundown, our final meal at sundown. So we have a really nourishing plate of food. And, we could do another episode also on fiber, right? The concept of eating 30 to 35 different types of fiber a week, we do that in one meal at the ashram. So there's soups and stews and sauteed veggies and roasted veggies and salads. And it doesn't have to be a lot of those ingredients, but a little bit. So this concept of eat the rainbow, just looking down at your plate to see that you have reds, blues, purples, greens. They're on your plate every single day. All the polyphenols. And what is the gut microbiome? The science that's coming out around the gut microbiome. Screw the probiotic. Focus on these prebiotic foods, these foods that are high in fiber, that are feeding the good bacteria in your gut, and you will naturally optimize your gut function. There will be discomfort. Just don't go out there and start, raging on fiber because Mona said so. Take your time building up to it. Focus on your digestion first. The quality of your digestion has to be optimal so that you can digest these foods to begin with.
I find mixing it in with a little bit of fermented food will help. Get some kombucha, some yogurt, some, kimchi, some natto if you're predisposed to that. I can't say that I am, but but the rest of it I love. I've got a refrigerator filled with different fermented foods because that can help you move more quickly towards getting to the point where you can handle all that fiber pretty easily.
Give it time. If you get bloated after the first, second, or third seating with your kimchi, which is still not my favorite, give it time, right? Your body, just like nature, it takes time to rebuild and restore. So give your body that time and give yourself that grace in order for it to do it. And microdosing is totally fine. I'm talking about microdosing food. Microdose a little piece of sauerkraut or a little piece of kimchi, and then focus on your pre and probiotic foods, which is really, really great. Yeah, that's the essence. And then we talk about hydration, right? So a lot of people are hydrating with a lot of coffee, with energy drinks, electrolyte water. I love that it's, taking taking its place right now. But if people are just drinking salt water every single day and it's a low quality brand of electrolytes, then you're doing more harm than good. Water, purified water, spring water if you can. No matter where you live, what city you live in, get a water purifier built into your house so that you're drinking purified water. You are made out of water. If you are tired, drink more water. If you have poor bowel movements, if you are suffering from not having bowel movements, drink more water every single day. From an Ayurvedic standpoint, we start our day with warm herbal teas every single morning. Our digestion should be hot, like fire burning, right? We call it this our Agni, our digestive fire. So skip the ice water first thing in the morning that would put out the smoke, right? Put out the fire and cause a lot of smoke and irritability. And instead keep the fire burning with things like herbal tea, hot water first thing in the morning. You'll notice a difference with your digestion within a few days for sure. Okay, so we talked about food, hydration, and then we're going to talk about the power of breath. So Navaz, you and I talked about this when you were here. What if your doctor sent you home without a prescription med, but instead a breathwork practice? If it came from then, would you practice it? Right? Well, the science is there. And at the ashram, when we practice yoga, and even looking back at ancient India, yoga wasn't the asana practice, the doing of the poses and contorting our bodies into these crazy ways. The practice of yoga starts with our breath every day. So a simple practice anybody can find on my website, which is box breathing, inhaling for the count of 4, holding for the count of 4, exhaling for the count of 4, and holding it out for the count of 4. That will help ground you. That will help with your digestion. That will help you sleep at night, just the art of becoming more present. And then you can work your way up to different types of breathwork practices that feel really nourishing for you. And whether you need breath work to turn your brain on, or different types of breath work to help you optimize your digestion, different types of breath work to even work on alleviating pain and the acidity within our body. Like the science is
Headaches.
there. It's phenomenal.
Headaches. I mean,
Headaches.
Breath work can resolve headaches rapidly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So don't underestimate the power of your breath. If you could start your day and or finish your day with your breath, there's your anti-age right there.
That's
Well,
we talk about bookending your day with your breathing all
There
the
you
time.
go.
So that's huge.
And there are specific stretch receptors in your lungs that when you do that deep diaphragmatic breathing that you're talking about, that prana yoga techniques, you're activating those stretch receptors, and they're connected to the vagus nerve. So you're activating that parasympathetic nervous system. It's in our language. We've talked about this many times in the show. It's in our language. Take a deep breath. We tell people, hey, take a deep breath. Count to 10. I mean, we do these things that are designed to shift us back into a parasympathetic state, so we'll make a good decision, so we won't blow up a relationship, so that we'll understand things more openly. I mean, all of this has been known for centuries, if not millennia, and we just need to get back into thinking about these things, because you don't replace what works because somebody patented a pill and can make profits on it. Let's get back to what works. And when what works is having problems, then we can advance on to the next thing. But you got to start with the basics.
You got it. And we are walking, talking evidence, right? So if you or someone you know has experienced stress, what are they doing? This like physiological sigh that we just need to like reset. It's like, okay, your body's telling you to breathe. So listen and tune in. And the analogy that I'd love to think about for breath work and even for mitochondrial function, it's the bringer of light. You're bringing light to darkness. You're activating your mitochondrial cells. You're rebooting the battery charge within you to give you a little bit more electricity, even around your heart, right? Through breath work, we can now study through electromagnetic fields, like the how your heart rate and energy can radiate from your heart as an organ, a muscle, an electric being in and of itself. So yeah, I think it's very clear. We get very, very excited talking about breath work.
And where do you put exercise in this?
Yeah, so that's the next one. So movement, right? So movement is part of every day at the ashram. So at the ashram, we tend to move our bodies doing yoga, and we practice hatha yoga at the ashram. So this is when you're holding a yoga pose, generally a little bit longer than doing something like a power yoga or Ashtanga yoga, where you're moving very quickly. And the intention around that, one, it builds a lot of strength. When you're holding your own body weight up and your arms out or holding a lunge, you will work your muscles, right? But it's also incorporating a mindfulness practice because you're working through challenges while you're on your mat. And what I always say is what you practice on your mat, you take out into the world. So for listeners, a lot of people, yoga is not my thing. Do yoga 3 times in 1 week and it will become your thing. You will feel the shift. Of course, the first, second, maybe even third yoga class, you might you're looking at your phone. When is this going to end? When is she going to cue us to move? But once you drop into your body, you're like, oh, I get it now. Now I understand why I need to do this. And for those of you who, even though I love teaching yoga and I love the conversation that we're having, I also love intensity. I love HIIT training. I love doing hard things. I love doing triathlons and stuff like that, but it has to come with balance. It has to come with balance. So I encourage listeners, despite what you're hearing in the media on doing HIIT training, it might not be for you. Find movement that you love. This can include hiking. This could be dance. This could be sport. This could be yoga. This could be spinning. Find what you love. The physiological impact of love and the endorphins that are going to be released through movement that you love are going to be tenfold, and it's going to make you go back and do it again. And then, the other one is just emotional release, right? So emotional release and this art of letting go is something that's really kind of at the forefront when you're living at an ashram. So I said this earlier, when I was at the ashram, I stopped being hardcore. I stopped dieting. I stopped doing hardcore exercise. And yet I lost the weight. The heart palpitations went away and I felt more sense of ease. Well, hey, that was the antithesis of everything that the media was telling me. What was I doing? We all know this. We go through day-to-day life with hundreds of thousands of tabs running and open in our mind, the past, the present, the future. We are these antennas for memories from the past, conversations that happen, that come up. Why am I thinking about this? From an issue that bothered me years ago, why am I thinking about this now at 3:00 in the morning, right? Chances are these are memories within cells within your body that are asking you to be released. And that's exactly what I did. I addressed all of the open running tabs in my mind through things like journal, through contemplation, through meditation, through movement, through letting go. If anyone has done a yoga teacher training, they know that by week 3, the yoga teachers, they're dropping like flies from their yoga mat because they're processing emotion. Tears are coming, rage is coming. They need to get it out. So yes, do a yoga teacher training if you ever have the opportunity to do that. But figure out a way of release. For a lot of people today, psychotherapy, holistic psychotherapy is great. NLP is really great. Finding a practitioner, someone outside of yourself, and I'll even say outside of your partner, who can really hold space for you to understand, process, and let go. And again, what that will feel like is your body holding on to so much. You're plugged into this high voltage electricity valve, buzzing all the time with worry and oh my God, it's so much, to finally unplugging the plug and oh my God, I can breathe again. The system comes back on track. This is a big part of emotional release at the ashram.
I recently did a class at this wonderful place that we have in Toronto here called Othership, and it was called Emotional Release. And it was a class that we had about 50 people in a sauna. It was a huge sauna room, and we're all sitting there in the sauna doing breath work for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And this sauna is intensely hot and intensely emotional, and everybody is around you, and just the heat is crazy. And about 10 minutes in, a couple of people started leaving. It started becoming a little bit more intense. And in this practice, there was this moment where they asked you, okay, if you feel the need to, let it out. And you're screaming and yelling and releasing these pent up emotions, these pent up challenges. And then after that 20-minute breath work in a sauna session, you go do an ice plunge. And then you can come back into the sauna afterwards. And it's really this opportunity teaching you to get back into your body and experience and feel those emotions one more time, and then allow that opportunity for that emotional release to take place. I think something like that, for those who are really intense or really need something to push them over the edge to get into their body, is a really great experience. But I love the idea of using breath, using exercise, using nutrition as tools to enable that emotional release, because emotions are the filters through which we see everything, right? Or that's how we we create the response to our environment. So I love what you've said there and how you've broken those down. But emotions, I think, are so important to truly understand.
Yeah, my wife in her executive coaching, she talks about stop petting your dead cat. And it's her way of saying, if you've had something bad happen to you in your life, you have one of two things to do with it. You can either bury it and have your memorial of service and then move on, or you can hold on to it and just sit there petting a dead cat. And the challenge, I loved what you said about journaling. And for some people, and some of our listeners out there might feel a little embarrassed about getting into a public setting or even talking to a single person about it. But journaling is a wonderful way to be your own counselor. But a couple of things I would just say, if you're going to do journaling about things that are difficult for you, recognize that in the process of thinking about them, you may encounter that you become not just emotional about it, but that you will have a physiological response. Your heart rate may go up. You may find yourself tense. You may find yourself breathing, rapidly and shallow. You might even start to cry or have other responses, get angry. Recognize that those are physiological releases that your body needs, but at the same time, in order to truly process through those things cognitively, you need to get control of them. And that's where the breath work comes in. And that's where, frankly, if it's been that traumatic a circumstance, you may need help getting yourself back into that parasympathetic state so that you can process. And that's one of the things that the device that we developed, the vagus nerve stimulator, can really be beneficial.
This is a good segue. So there's two parts to that. Those are both just such great points. There's some listeners who the thought of journaling, it's like opening up Pandora's box. They're reliving everything. Why would they do that? Right? So when I work with my clients who've experienced some trauma, a lot of trauma, is approaching it with a lens of loving kindness towards telling a story. I remember when I was 8 years old and this happened, and this is how it made me feel. And through visualization, a lot of practitioners listening might know they can kind of guide. It's kind of like a inner child work. You're guiding yourself to have a memory, but then going in and saving your inner child from the experience or the memory and just kind of showcasing that things are different now. Things are okay now. And a lot of us need that as a foundation to know that it's not about going back into the memory or into the timeline. It's about visiting the timeline and coming back out of that timeline again. And the other point, I love that you brought up the sound bath, right? Sound, vibration, frequency. We are frequency. Our vagal tone is impacted by frequency, right? But I remember the first time that I went to a sound bath, I couldn't let out a scream. If I let out a scream, I'm not being a quote unquote good girl, right? We don't do that. I'm proper. I'm supposed to be proper, right? And for listeners, if that resonates with you, find a sound bath where there's opportunity, where they get really loud. There's a couple of instruments. They turn up the drum. They turn up the sound bowls. They turn up music really, really loud. And all of a sudden, on the count of 3, everyone in the room screams. And it's this collective, you could say physiological sigh, right? Where everyone's letting it out. And it feels like a really safe space. And it's so cathartic. It just feels so incredibly soothing to the soul. So that could be another option for you, because a lot of people, they hear about these things. They know about journaling, but actually following through and doing it, it's about finding your entry point in a way that's going to feel really safe for you. And the second part that you brought up is community. And this would be the last piece of the ashram. You're in community at the ashram. The people who go there have a like-minded spirit or an intention to connect with oneness, to connect to their spirit, to connect with a part of themselves that they might not have been in touch with for a really long time. And this is the essence. They're not necessarily founded on Hinduism, but it's the foundation of consciousness. So we've all felt this idea of consciousness. There's something that's greater at work outside of myself. And even in the way, when we think about the vagal nerve and vagal tone, what is it about that magic that is in resemblance to the magic of connecting to higher source, right? Because there's an understanding and knowing when I do this, as I look at my True Vega, when I use this on myself during times of stress and intensity, it's cueing me to think oh yeah, my body knows how to heal. My vagal tone is being told to relax, to calm, to soothe. It's sending a message to my gut, which is sending a message to my brain to shift my state of being right now. And if I can shift my state of being right now into the version of myself that's connected to something higher than myself, outside of just what's happening in this moment, there's that ease and that exhale again, right? So I just wanted to call that out, because you've got to look at your entryway, but there's certain, like all of the things that we're talking about, they do the exact same thing within the body, which is coherence, right? And it's that coherence that I think that we're all desperately seeking today in order to heal. And I hope that frequency and coherence is part of conversation within the Western medical community moving forward, because I think that once we start understanding that we are energetic beings, and maybe the fact that our healing journey isn't so much about the physicality and macros and HIIT, that maybe it's more of a spiritual journey, then it's going to loosen the leash around what it takes to feel our best every day.
Yeah, and I think there's an equality, if you want. From the energy and vibrational standpoint, you use the terms coherence and decoherence. For people who are more, chemistry and cellular based, they're going to think more like homeostasis and, deviating from homeostasis. And I always say that when you're in sympathetic dominance, when you're in that sympathetic state, fight or flight, you must leave the homeostasis, state, the homeostatic state, and move into a decoherent state. If you're going to use the vibrational language, you need to move into that decoherent state in order to then battle whatever it is that you're battling, and then move back into that coherent or homeostasis. If you stay out of coherence for too long, if you're in that decoherent state for too long, then things become dysfunctional. You can't stay there forever. It's like a symphony. There are small segments in your symphony where it could sound cacophonous. It could sound like out of tune. It could sound not right, but you want to bring that. Bach was famous for doing this. And then you bring it back, and you bring that decoherence back into coherence. And then you say, now I understand where everything came from. Now I understand why it sounded so bad, but now it sounds so wonderful. And you have to get back there, because if not, then it sounds like you're listening to a bunch of kindergartners playing woodwind instruments. And, nobody wants to do that other than a parent. So, and I've been there, but after that, you have to go back and just listen to a little, Vangelis or something like that. Just anyway.
I love that you brought that up. Healing today, the feedback that I'm getting, even for myself, it's a very selfish journey. It's so self-indulged, and we're so focused on ourselves, and it's a little exhausting. And the analogy with the symphony is, if you were to all consider, each and every one of us came into this world with a perfect note, the sound that we were intended to play, living this one beautiful life. And all we had to do was stick to playing that note. But over time, we get sidetracked, we get too stressed, we live out of coherence, we become too self-absorbed, we lose priority of what really matters in life. The list goes on, right? All of a sudden, we're that instrument in the orchestra that's off, right? And it doesn't feel good to go out in the world. We're I feel off and creaky, and every day I feel like something is off. Address your coherence. Tune in to falling in love with the notes that you came to play. And all of a sudden, it dissipates the intensity of how hard it feels to heal. Because right now, the healing journey is looking like there's so many things that we have to do every single day. But going back to the roots of healing, the things that we discussed, from sleep to movement to breath to community, it's just get the foundations right. When you get the foundations right, your coherence, your note in the symphony will become optimized again, and you'll feel it.
Completely.
And when we're all playing that note wonderfully at the same time, the sound is wonderful, right? The world is beautiful, and it feels wonderful, and everybody is working together. And that's where community really comes in, I think, to play.
Yes.
Exactly. That connection piece is one that I think a lot of people take for granted, right? We live in a very lonely world. As much as we are together, we're not physically together right now. We're all together on screen, which is wonderful. And I love that technology has enabled this. But being in the presence of other people has such a powerful experience, something that over the last 5 years, we've become acutely aware of, is how much we want to be around other people, and how much having that physical community actually is so beneficial to us. So
loneliness is a greater cause for mortality than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
yes.
Here we are. I'm with you, but my gosh, if you want to heal, find your tribe. Go surround yourself with the people that lift you up, that are aligned with your views, that have a common passion or purpose or creativity. And healing just feels a lot easier when you're just surrounded with the right people and right tribe.
Completely.
That's a great point.
In fact, that's why these 12-step programs, they require you to go into a community. You've been so decoherent, in such a decoherent state, you chemically altered, you're in fight or flight, literally because you've taken in toxins, and you need to come together in a group of people who have all experienced the same thing, some of whom are farther along in their process of healing, to help you become coherent again, get back into a homeostatic state where you can recover. The recovery process is so much better and so much more robust and so much more likely to succeed if you have that social support. And we know that the social support is activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is why vagus nerve stimulation is being used now and being studied as an adjunctive therapy for recovering from substance abuse. So it all ties back together.
I have one final question, Mona, for you, and I think it's the most important question we're ever going to ask. And what is the best diet?
I knew it was going to come out. All right, so let's break this down, okay? So the best diet, I think, is one that comes from nature that also makes you feel good. Look, is there validity to increasing your protein as you age? Yes, 1,000%. If you're someone who is trying to eat 100 grams of protein, 120, 30, 40, 50 grams of protein a day, and you're thinking about, the animal when it died, like the ethics around animal protein. I work with so many people who are like, I know I need to eat so much protein, but like, I feel bad eating all these animals. Then maybe it's not for you. Like, you're taking on energy of food. And I have to say, looking at a lot of people in the blue zones who are living longer, there wasn't such an intensity on protein. And, coming from my dad, who's South Asian, I have a lot of people on my side of the family who've lived to being over 100 and they didn't eat any animal protein. Okay. So I say that if animal protein feels good for you and you're eating high quality grass-fed organic sources, you know where it comes from and there's some sort of ethics around it, go for it, consume it. But please match that with foods that come from the earth that carry frequency and vibration, high vibrational, colorful foods, rich in fiber, rich in polyphenols that actually give light to your body, that feed the microbes, the ecosystem within you. That's the foundation at the ashram. And it's the source of the 2 meals that we eat for brunch and then for dinner again. And the third takeaway from that, I would say, is eat more like your ancestors. So here I am, half Indian, half Danish. I thrive on a more Eastern Indian Ayurvedic style diet. Makes me feel amazing. I feel joyful, happy. My hormones are in balance. I feel strong. My brother thrives on more of a meat and potato diet, like my mom's side, and dairy's, cool with him. And having some roasted veggies there, cheese and stuff like that is fine with him. He thrives. So eat more like your ancestors. Look at where you came from and try to adopt a diet that is like that. If I'm looking for just like a general kind of soundbite, then I would say the Mediterranean diet. It's the one diet that's come back over and over and over again with the science that backs it up. And when we look at the foods that they're eating, there wasn't a lot of animal protein. There were some beans and some lentils, lots of really good quality fats for our brain, for our muscles, our organs, and also a focus on fiber, right? So that's the 2 answers. But just please make sure that, going back to that question, is it nourishing you or depleting you? Is it making you feel good? Is it giving you the energy that you need? And with my clients, I look at the biology. I run their labs twice a year. I'm checking in on their protein levels. I'm taking a look at every single system within their body to see that they are optimized. I'm looking at their micronutrients to make sure that we're not supplementing just because social media said so. We're supplementing based on your blueprint, your constitution. And that's how you build the perfect meal plan for yourself.
I think that's perfect. I like the important takeaway, I think, for me is bioindividuality is key. And how you perceive or how you feel about taking something in is going to affect the energy that it then creates within your body and the energy that it then provides and the nourishment that it then provides within your body. So if it doesn't feel right, feel free to test it. But if it doesn't feel right, you're not going to take it in a way that's going to be nourishing to you. I think that's such an important takeaway for anybody who's looking to create some sort of dietary change. Mediterranean is a great starting point, but everybody has to modify within there. And I think each individual has a diet that works for them. I love that you kind of brought that up, but there are these very specific things that you do want to do. It's got to feel right. It's got to be something that's individualized, and it's generally got to be whole foods, high quality, high energy, high vibration type foods.
And if you're going to do that, it can be very daunting to try to look at the entire spectrum of things that you could eat and try to figure out what's going to work best for your body. I mean, I know that people say, well, there's so many different choices out there. There are tests that you can do, genetic tests. I mean, we've talked about this before, where you can get a sense from just what your personal genetics are, that diversity within our species, within our even families, to recognize that, we carry different genes, and some genes will respond better to, coffee in the morning versus tea, or steaks versus lentils, or, we have that within our system. But obviously, dairy products versus not dairy, depending on your lactase levels, so we have to look at those things, and they're available for us to test, and it will help you guide your search for your own personal diet that works best for you.
You got it. Yeah, genetics is something that I do with all my clients, just to understand, so we can further customize and cater a protocol that's going to feel good. And on the flip side too, let's just hover on that for a second. So dairy, dairy, among a lot of other foods, they're just not the same quality that our ancestors ate. We know that there's 0 studies that show eat more processed food and you're going to live a longer, healthier, happier life, right? So when you go grocery shopping, don't go when you're hungry. Spend your time focusing on the outer perimeter of the store, right? Where things tend to be real, whole foods, and use this as an opportunity. Like, as a nutritionist, food is very important. Food can also dictate how you perform. Food can cause you to feel more joy and also feel more stress and anxiety. People don't connect that together. But for so many people, when I'm putting them on a whole foods diet, like just going off of processed food for a month, anxiety dissipates, sleep scores go up, HRV also improves. It's wild. So I really encourage listeners to use this as an opportunity, not only for your own personal health, but this is how you can implement change that needs to happen, right? In a world where CPG is making so much money by capitalizing on selling you food that isn't making you feel good internally, externally, psychologically, physically, they're paid, and you're being sold a story that it's going to help you when it won't. So use this as an opportunity to control with how you spend your money for yourself and for your household. And for parents listening, I know goldfish crackers are sold, at all the schools. I know that these bars and Z bars and literally garbage food. I get hate mail on goldfish. Don't serve it to your kids. If they have it at the birthday parties, their bodies are so resilient. They know that it's a food that, I've been eating really well, so my body can handle this right now. If it's in your house, they will eat it. If it's not within your house, they won't eat it. If you only put fruits and veggies in front of a child for a week, they will eat. A child will never allow itself to starve, okay? But help them undo the conditioning that they're also receiving from media.
I love that you said that. Just a couple of days ago on Sunday, my wife and my 7-year-old cut up a bunch of veggies and fruits, had it all sitting ready to go. And my daughter goes, we should do this every weekend. And she just was snacking away at the cucumbers and had all these grapes and strawberries, and just was loving the experience of having that done and be ready for the week, right? Or at least for a few days, because that then helped her feel nourished and good. And so we're all parents here. We all are working to create healthy environments for our kids. I think that's so powerful. If you can enable your kids to not have the same type of health struggles that maybe you're dealing with, isn't that kind of the goal of being a parent, is teaching them how to not have to deal with health struggles when they're older, teaching them how to be nourished, how to be human, how to live in a positive way. For me, that's the goal.
The challenge, though, is there's DoorDash out there, Uber Eats and Grubhub, and they're basically drug pushers. I mean, these you're living with drug pushers literally on their phones, and they can use it at any time to order. The I intercepted the 5-pound bag of what Sour Patch Kids.
Oh, no.
Myself,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, this is like the worst possible food you could possibly put in your body,
I
laced
think
with
you can
every
call it
chemical
food.
that's the wrong. And and he's an athlete, and you're thinking to yourself, what are you doing to yourself? So yeah, just by all means, train them young and recognize that you have to continue that, because they're going to be confronted with every possible bad thing that there's industries designed to push it on them.
Teach them how to read labels. My 7-year-old knows how to read a label. And if she sees a word and she doesn't understand what the word is, she knows that her body won't understand it either. So
I love that.
I love that.
I love that point. That's really cool. Mona, this has been absolutely phenomenal. Having you on is such a pleasure. And we love that you're able to be here with us, bringing ancient wisdom into day-to-day lives, into our modern day-to-day lives. And I think that's going to be really important for us going forward, because for each of us as individuals, for our next generation, for our kids, we need to learn how to nourish ourselves. We need to learn how to ensure that we're getting good energy and good nutrients and good energy back into our food and into our bodies and into our lives. And I think that's so empowering for everybody that's listening today. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. Any final thoughts? Where can people kind of learn more about you? I know you can share about Rooted in Wellness, and wherever anybody can find out more about you.
Yeah, to connect, find me on Instagram at Mona Sharma. I connect with everyone there. I love that sense of digital community. My podcast, Rooted in Wellness, where I'm merging, these ancient rituals with modern day medicine. Also, I think that the more education that you have, the more empowered you will be to make healthier decisions in your life. And then I've got some free tools on my website. So it's monasharma.com.
I love it. Thank you so much again for joining us, for sharing everything with us. This was wonderful, and can't wait to have you on again soon to learn more about what you're doing, and
Thank you.
have another fun podcast digging into consciousness and whatnot.
For sure.
Yeah, consciousness and vagal tone. Understand.
Yeah, I really do want to learn more about
and where they
your
merge.
quantum healing masters and all the work that you're doing there. So very soon we will have you on for that. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.